Hi everyone! Welcome to our first class. Today we are going to be learning how to paint this painting here. It's a beautiful sunset. We're going to be focusing on gradient, texture, and detail. So we're going to be starting off with a gradient background. So we're going to need yellow, pink, and purple for that. And then we're going to add black texture for our land and some black detail for our foreground. You can pause this video as needed, so please feel free to pause, get yourself set up, and then when you're ready to start painting, grab yourself a canvas. I like to use a 8x10 canvas, but any size will work just fine for this painting. So you need your paints, you need your paint brushes. We're going to be using a large flat brush. Something like this or even bigger is good. I'll probably use something just a little bit bigger. And I'll explain why you need a large flat brush for the gradient. Then for your detail painting, you're going to want just a small brush, like a zero, a round zero brush is good. And when it comes to the texture, we're going to be using a rect brush that looks something like this. Now, if you don't have a rect brush, you can still use just a normal flat brush. That will be fine. About a centimeter wide. So either of those brushes. So these are the brushes we're going to be primarily using today. So here are the paints I will be using today. Any brand of paint should work just fine. Now, different brands of paint will go on your canvas a little differently. These are all what I would call entry-level paints. They're crafter paints, so they're a little bit more opaque. And they go on a little bit like smoother. They're a little more watery. If you have paints that are more in the Winsor Newton family, or they come in those tubes that you kind of squeeze out, right? Those are usually a little thicker. Either one will totally work fine for you. All right, so now let's get started here. You're going to want a palette. I like to use lids. I just like to use recycling for my palette. And we're going to be starting with our yellow and our pink. We're going to be doing a base gradient. So this isn't going to be the final gradient, but we are going to be doing 2 layers here. So our first layer is going to support our second layer. So we're just going to use the 2 colors for now. So this is the flat brush I'm going to use today. You can see it's about 1 inch wide. All of the blending is going to happen in the middle. So when paint gets stuck on the outer edges, it actually causes streaks. So the more middle you have on your brush, the better of a blending brush it is. Now you can get too big, of course, you need to maintain control. So that's why I like about 1 inch wide. If I were to blend with this brush, I would have much less area to blend, right? Because the center, this area is much smaller. So that's why I like to use a brush about this size. I am going to start with my yellow. The yellow is going to be in the center. So we're going to be focusing here for the yellow, and then we're going to transition pink up and down. So here I go. I like to paint with the corner of my brush. I just find it gives me a bit more control, and you'll see that pretty quick I'm going to be adding paint only to the corner. All right, now remember, I am the teacher. I'm going to paint fast, so you can pause as you need to, okay? So there's my layer of yellow. Now, while that's wet, I'm going to put just a little bit of paint on the corner of my brush. So half of my brush is empty here. That is going to go above the yellow. And I'm going to go back and forth and back and forth. So the bottom part of my brush was empty. And that gives me a nice blending area here where I don't need to worry about any paint getting into that yellow center. So I'm going back and forth all the way across, kind of like a printer depositing ink on a page. All right, so I need a bit more pink. I'm just going to add it to the corner. So always my the blending part of my brush is almost empty, right? I'm always blending with the bottom and middle, and I'm applying color with the tip. So I'm just adding in my pink back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now my yellow is starting to dry. That's okay. I might need to add just a bit more yellow for the bottom. So now I have a nice transition from pink into yellow. So I need to do the same thing on the bottom. Now my yellow is dry. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit more yellow. I need to clean my brush off. So I'm going to use my water to clean my brush off. And then you're going to want to use a rag or some paper towel to dry your brush. We don't really want too much water in our brush today. So now I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to the base, just so I have some wet paint to blend into. When you're doing a blend, you need your paint to be wet. Back and forth the whole way. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of pink to the corner of my brush. Like that. Empty part touches the yellow, right? Like this. And we go back and forth until we get that seam blended out. So the seam is the paint between the yellow and the pink, basically. That's our seam, right? So we want that seam to be blended out. And then we can just use the corner of our brush to add pink all the way down. Now I mentioned that this would be our first layer. And the reason for that is I always like to do at least 2 layers. Sometimes when I'm painting on my own, I'll do 3 or 4 layers. Acrylic paint, no matter what brand you have, is going to be just semi-transparent. And so when you end up doing just a single layer, you still see through to the canvas. And you can see that on my painting. I'm just going to hold it up here. It's a little hard to see there. You can see through to the canvas. You can see a little bit of the white coming through, right? So our color isn't super vibrant. So if we let this dry 100%, completely dry, and then we can come back to it and do our second layer, that second layer is going to be so much stronger. So we're going to let this dry completely, and then we're going to do our next layer. Now, one more thing I want to mention, you'll notice we didn't add purple to this layer. And that's just because, we could have added purple, but it is a much harder gradient to add in the third color. So I thought this would give us a chance to warm up, get a chance to get a feel for gradients. And then when we add our purple, the purple's going to be supported by the pink. If I blend purple and pink together, I just get a little bit of a pinky purple. Now, if I blend yellow and purple together, I get brown. So that's why we wanted to make sure the yellow stayed in the center. That way, when we put the purple on top, the pink is going to be supporting the purple, not the yellow. So our purple is going to have a pink undertone, which is going to be very nice. And the yellow will have a yellow undertone, which is fine, right? And then the transition area here will be a little bit more pink, but it'll also have a bit of a yellow undertone. So it's just going to help everything feel more cohesive as well, right? So that's why we chose to do the underpainting using only pink and yellow. Okay, why don't you grab your blow dryers, have a snack, whatever it is you want to do to get your painting dry. You can just wait and pause the video. I'm going to use my blow dryer, so I'm going to pause the video, blow dry, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so now I have a dry painting. You'll notice the transparency is even more obvious now. So when your paint dries, it does tend to change color a little bit, and sometimes it gets more transparent so you can see things through a little bit more. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not a good thing. So with our gradient today, it's not a great thing, so we want to do one more layer, right? We don't want to just leave this because it's a little bit streaky. We can see a little bit too much canvas through the paint. So I'm going to be using those same 2 colors. I'm going to add just a little bit more, and we're going to be adding purple as well. So we need to make sure that our yellow and our purple never touch. So the pink layer becomes almost a little bit of a safety layer. So the pink is the buffer between the purple and the yellow. And again, the reason for that, if we blend yellow and purple together, we get brown, and we don't want a brown sky. We want our colors to be nice and vibrant. All right, so I'm going to get my brush nice and clean. You want to start with a nice clean brush. Give it a good dry. A little bit of paint that fell onto my canvas there. There we go. Doesn't want to come off. All right. So we're going to do the same kind of thing, except we're going to be doing 1, 2, 3 colors. I'm going to start with my yellow again. And I'm just going to apply the yellow to the center. So I need a wet paint to blend into. Now I don't want to get too high with it, so I'm not putting quite as much yellow down this time. It's just along from here to here. I'll add just a little bit more. There we go. Making it a little bigger. Now I'm going to add my pink. Again, I'm just going to put it on the corner of my brush, leaving half of my brush empty. Empty half touches the yellow. Pink above the yellow, right? So we go back and forth and back and forth until that seam becomes seamless. So we don't want there to be a divide. We want to make sure that we have a nice blend between our pink and our yellow. So I'm going over and over and over and over and over. So that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to add a bit more pink above the pink. So I'm kind of blending pink into my pink right now. And we can take this almost to the top. So I'm going to do just a bit more pink. I'm going to leave the top inch reserved for the purple. There we go. Always adding paint to the corner of the brush. Now I can add purple to the corner. I haven't bothered to clean my brush. I'm not mixing two primaries here. So I have purple at the top, kind of empty on the bottom. Again, we're doing purple on the top. Emptiness touches the pink. Sure, there's a little bit of pink on the brush from before, but that's totally fine. That'll help our blend. And I'm going to go back and forth until I get that seamless blend. And now I'm going to pull it down just a bit, but not enough to get it into the yellow. Just enough to get the color moving downward. There we go. So we have a little bit of that purple in our sky. Now it's time to do the same thing on the bottom. So I'm going to clean my brush really, really, really well. We don't want any purple getting into the yellow. That's something we really need to watch out for. So make sure your brush is nice and clean. I do this to make sure it's clean. Nope, no paint's coming off, so I think we're okay. So again, we need to have wet paint here. So I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow. I'm not going to go too high. You know, I actually am going to blend just a little bit high. I think I want my yellow to go up a bit, so I'm gonna do a bit of a blend here. I'm breaking my rules. Just gonna blend a little tiny bit more here. There we go. When you're an artist, I guess you can break your rules. Okay, now I'm gonna go down here. I just wanted to get that a bit softer. So I have my nice yellow here, and I'm gonna go with pink on the corner of my brush only, right? So this is still empty and yellow. This is pink. Pink goes down, yellow, empty part goes up, and I go back and forth over the seam. We go over the seam until the seam becomes blended. Over it, there we go. Blended, blended, blended. So we have a really nice bright yellow center now. All right, it's very blended. So now I'm going to add, actually I'm gonna go over and just blend this a little bit more here. Gonna go in with my yellow and try to pull some yellow down. Just a little bit of yellow. There we go. If you get a little bit of streakiness in your paint, it's actually okay because that's going to be our waves. All right, now I have my pink. I'm gonna add more pink down here. I wanna make sure I'm blending into pink when I'm adding my purple. So I don't want any yellow to be on my brush. So I'm gonna keep going down with pink almost to the bottom here. And I want about an inch of room to add my purple at the bottom. There we go. So now I'm going to use the empty part of my brush to add purple. So I'm gonna go with the empty part. I'm gonna load it up with purple here. This part, or sorry, the top part, I guess the bottom part's purple, and then the blending part is empty. The blending part is empty. So we're gonna go here, and we're gonna add our purple. Yeah, this purple seems to be a little bit deeper than our other purple. I probably just am using more paint, but that is okay. Your sunset doesn't need to be completely balanced. We can make, flip your painting around, make the top the bottom the top, whichever one you want for your water. You can use, you can flip your painting around at this point. There we go. So now I have a gradient going from purple to pink to yellow to pink back to purple. So we're going to let this dry, or we're going to use a blow dryer, and then we're going to add our next step, which is texture. Now I would like to add, because this is a flex class, if you want to do one more layer, you totally can, right? You don't have to wait for anyone. You can just do what you like here. So pause the video if you want to do this layer again, just to add one more layer. I love doing that. I love doing that. And you can still see a little bit of transparency, right? So even if I were doing this painting as a gift, let's say, I would probably do one more layer. But as far as doing a painting in class, this is completely acceptable. If your gradient looks like this, it is amazing. You're doing great, okay? So this is, again, we want to dry our painting. So I'm going to hit this with a blow dryer. I'm going to pause the video. And then when I come back, my painting will be dry. So we are going to dive into black. And don't do what I'm doing and put paint on your palette over your canvas. If your paint drops on your canvas, it might cause some issues. And we are going to use just a nice kind of smallish brush. You could even use your detail brush here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add our land line. So we're going to add in a horizon line. We're just going to do a simple line right across our painting. Try to do it about the center of your yellow. So if you want to, you can flip your painting around, you know, kind of like that, whatever way works best for you. I'm actually going to use this brush. It says 0 brush, and I'm going to add my horizon line, which is just a simple line from edge to edge. So I have my black paint, and your line does not need to be perfect. This is low pressure line. So if it's not perfect, that's okay. I've already run out of paint there. We're going to be adding lots of texture to this line. So we don't need it to be perfect. This just kind of gives us a guide. There we go. That's all you need. Something like that. Oops, I went a little deep there. That's okay. We're painting land. Land is not perfect, right? So little bumps are okay. That sort of thing is all perfectly fine. Remember, please pause the video as needed, okay? So if you need a bit more time, I'm sure you do, just give your video a pause after you've done painting, I'm done painting my line here. There we go. So I have my line in. Now, if we were minimalists and if we were going for a very simple sunset, I would say we are done. But we are going to add a little bit more detail today. So the next brush you're going to need is your damaged flat brush. And again, if you don't have a damaged flat brush, you can just use a regular flat brush. All right, either one of those is fine, but something that has some texture on it is better. So if you have something like this, that's what you want. Before we get into our painting, let's do a little bit of practice. So I have a scrap piece of paper here. I'll move this up a bit. Don't practice on top of your painting like I'm doing. Move your painting aside when you're going to do your practice. And remember, if you need more time with your line, pause the video, just give it a nice pause. So I want just a little bit of paint on my brush. So this is a lot of paint. So scrape off some paint so you just have a tiny bit. You want to be able to see the bristles. What we're going to do is dab. Straight up and down, dab, 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 like that. I'll just do a zoom. So you're going to get texture. Now, I love painting with this kind of texture. I really do. So when we're doing our hill, when we're doing our land, we're going to be putting our brush at a bit of an angle. So this is straight up and down. This is an angle. It condenses the bristles just a little bit. And we're going to kind of dab like this. Oh, I have a little bit of a stray bristle, so I'm going to flip my brush around here. See if I can do it better the other way. This is why it's good to practice. Here we go. So we're going to go like this, and we're going to dab, dab, dab straight up and down, and that's going to give us the texture for our land. Now my brush might be a little bit too racked. I'm getting a little bit too much fluff, so you know, I'm going to try that normal brush. Let's see if this one works a bit better. Or maybe this one. This one's a little bit less damaged. Either one of these would work. Whatever brush you're going to use, just do a little bit of practice. You always want just a little bit of paint, dry brush technique, so just a bit of paint, not too much paint. scrape off most of that paint. Let's see what this one looks like. That's pretty good too, right? We have a nice stamp there. And this one has more control. You can see I have more control with it. So I'll be using this brush today. Again, pause the video, practice a little bit, practice as much as you need to. Once you get that technique down, we're going to jump into the painting. I'm going to zoom in again just a little bit here, move my painting down. I like my hill to go up and then in the center come down a bit and then go back up. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to I'll use this side, tap, 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 tap. So I'm getting down into that edge. You can see I'm getting a bit of that texture. Now, the nice thing about this painting is that we're not following a reference. You're not trying to make it look exactly like something else. So you can make your painting look however you want it to look. You don't have to make it look like mine if you don't want to. Adding a little bit more black, again, clearing most of the brush off. I keep forgetting I'm zoomed in. Now, here's the low part. So this is the part that I try to be the cleanest on in terms of my texture. I come nice and low here. You can see I have a gradual slope down. And I'm going to go just a little higher here. There we go. Kind of feels like maybe those nice trees on a hill. Now I'm going to come here. I'm going to continue this, and then I'm going to start to go up a little bit. Maybe I'll start to go up about here. I'm doing my low point just a little bit on the left. Dab, 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 just a little bit of paint so that you get that nice texture. And maybe I'll even come down a little bit and then go back up. Maybe I'll give myself like a little secondary low point here, but I won't go as low. When it comes down here, this gives us a little bit of a focal point. And when you're doing any kind of art, you do want to be thinking about your composition. So in your composition, it's nice to have a place where you can kind of pull your attention towards. So in creating these slopes going up and down on the horizon line, we're actually pulling our eye to the center of our painting, or at least to the off center, right? Our eye is kind of getting pulled into this space here, which is lovely. That's a sign of a good composition. I'm going to make this just a little bit more of a taller hill, and that's going to help pull that in even more. There we go. So we have this beautiful kind of mountainous, hilly landscape now, but we need to add in our reflection. So the reflection is going to be a little bit of a looser version of what we just did. And I do like to leave a little bit of a highlight in between the reflection and the land. And the reason for that is waves. When waves get closer to land, they tend to make the water choppy. And choppy water doesn't reflect very well. Still water reflects much better. So the further out you get, there's a good probability the water is going to be a little bit stiller here. So we have a really still day. There's not too much wind, but we still have those little bit of waves right at the shoreline. So that's why we have that nice little bright spot there. Also, I just think it looks better. I think it breaks up that big kind of black piece that we have right down the center. And again, it kind of pulls our eye into this space, right? You can see we kind of want to come in here. We want to play around in here. We want to go swimming. We want to see what it's about. So I'm going to take that same brush. We're going to do the same technique here. I'm not going to bother with that line. I'm just going to go right in. I do want to leave a little bit of space, so I'm not going to go quite to the edge. I'm going to start with my line, but this time I'm just tapping it in. Tap, 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 tap. As I get closer to that low point, I'm going to break up my tap, and then I'll keep on tapping. By tapping in our line, we kind of take the hardest part out. So this is the hardest part here of this reflection, is getting it close enough without getting it too close. You'll notice in a few spots I got a bit too close, but that's okay. Maybe the waves aren't as aggressive in those spots, right? Maybe there's a reason for that. Over here, same thing. I'm getting a little bit closer there, bring it in a bit closer. There we go. Just a nice little reflection. Now we're going to go out just a bit. We don't want to go too far here. The reflection doesn't need to be a mirror image, right? It's a little broken up, but we do want to have the weight balance. So my reflection is a little shorter than my land, just a little bit. And I want to make sure that the weight of it is the same. So this is the high point, and then it's coming down in the same way. I'm skipping it over here a little bit. Now I'm going to come back, make sure that your high point matches, right? So if this mountain is higher than this one, this reflection should be longer than this one. So this is a little higher than the other side. So I'm going to just do a shorter reflection here. And it doesn't even need to be solid. You can leave some gaps in here, right? It's just a reflection, so anything can disrupt it. Any kind of water movement will disrupt your reflection. There we go. So that's a pretty nice little reflection there. I got a little stampy here, so I'll show you what I mean. There's a repeated pattern happening. That's really common with this technique. So if that happens to you, just turn your brush around and kind of go over that area just a little bit to break that up. There we go. So it feels a little bit less stampy now. It feels a little bit more organic. So that is the end of that step. We are done painting our land mass. Now the next step of this painting is to paint our foreground. We're going to be painting some rocks. We're going to add a little bit of a highlight to those rocks, and then we're going to finish it off with our detail. So if you are ready, you can paint along, but I imagine you probably need a little bit more time. So pause the video. The next brush you're going to want is just a regular flat brush is good for this. You could use the wrecked one, but if you have one that's not wrecked, it's maybe a little easier. So the rocks are black. We're going to do a black base, and then we'll add a little bit of a highlight after. So I'm just going to go imagine there's a rock there. You can do your rocks however you like. They don't have to follow the same pattern as me. I'm imagining here's a little rocky shore here, and then maybe there's a second rock here. I like to leave this part empty, so I don't go all the way to the end with my rocks, but if you want to, you can add rocks all through the front. There we go. So we're going to add our reflection a little bit later. So we're going to let this dry. While this is drying, we can go ahead and add in that grass. I think it might be called cattail. I call it wheatgrass. That's the kind of stuff that grows by the water. So we're going to be adding in these pieces of really nice kind of water grass here. Now, you want a nice fine line. Again, this does take a little bit of practice. So you're going to want a nice small brush, 0 or smaller. Some brushes have a 000 on them. If your brush says 000, that is the better brush to use. So whichever brush has the most zeros on it, that's the one you want. All right, that's the brush you want to use. So I am going to be demonstrating again. I'm going to move this out of the way for a second. Should probably get another scrap piece of paper here. So when you're doing a detail line, you want to make sure that you're not pressing too hard with your brush. So you want a nice small brush, a 0 brush or smaller, right? This kind of a size here, right? Something nice and small. And you're going to want to make sure you don't press down too hard. So here's my 0 brush. Now, if I press down hard, my line looks like this. And that's because the belly of the brush is connecting with the page. If you want a detail line, you want to make sure just the tip of the brush, just the very point touches the page. So see the difference. Now my paint may be a little thick. I'm going to add just a bit of water to it. A little bit of water, and I'm talking about a bit of water. Like it still looks the exact same. You don't want too much water or it will become messy. A little tiny bit of water can help your paint flow better. There we go. Look at that beautiful fine line. So just practice this a little bit. Remember, same brush. If I press down, the belly touches, the line becomes thick. If you don't press down, if you just let the tip touch, you can get a much nicer line. Now this is the brush I'm going to use here. It's got a longer tip to it, which makes it hold a bit more paint. But I'm going to show you that this brush, same thing. If I push down hard, my line is thick. If I hold it and just let the tip touch, my line is thin. You can see I'm getting a very similar line. This one's a bit darker though, so that's why I want to use this brush. It holds more paint, therefore I can get a longer line. But just use whatever brush you have today. All right, so we're going to jump over to our painting again, but please pause the video, practice as much as you need to on that previous step there. I want to make sure you're comfortable before we dive into our painting. So here I have my paint with just a droplet of water, barely any water in it, just to thin it out a little bit. I'm using my 000 brush, and I'm going to start to add my streaks. You can add as many or as few as you want. Now this is probably the hardest part of the painting. So do remember, we're learning, right? We're learning. You can do this painting over and over again if you want to, but don't stress too much about it, right? It's just a painting. We can always do more paintings. And you know, you probably will over your life. You'll do so many more paintings. Some of them are going to work. Some of them aren't, and that's okay. Even when they don't work, that means you're learning, right? We're always learning. So try your best to just use the tip of your brush here. If you can only get short grass, that's okay. If your brush isn't holding as much paint, just go with short blades of grass. That's okay. I'm gonna have one coming in off the edge here. Add as many or as few as you want. You can see mine are crossing over. I'm even gonna add a few going like up, maybe in the other direction, just for variety. I don't want them all to be the same. I do want most of them to be going towards the right. Usually you do see kind of a consistency like that. They grow towards the sun, or the wind is always pushing them in a direction. So usually you do see a little bit of that happening, but I'm going to add a few going the other way just to make it feel more organic. There's one. I'm doing just a few off the side here as well. Maybe the rocks go down below my painting and you just can't see them, right? So I'm adding just a few here. And I've added a lot now. I'm going to add one coming up like this. Again, going the other way just to break things up a bit. Yeah, I think that might be enough. You don't have to add, you know, you can add a few really short ones if you want, just like little ones that don't have any tips to them. They're just little grass pieces. That's okay too if you want to add some of those. I usually add them around the base of my longer grass, but you don't need to do that. I'm just adding a few. I don't think there was any in my example painting, but sometimes I do like to add them in just for a bit of texture. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Now I'm sure that you need more time for that step. So just as a reminder, I say it over and over again, pause the video if you need to. Now is a good time to pause. Finish all of those blades of grass there. And then for the next step, we're going to use our 0 brush again, and we're going to add in the really delicate tips. And the way we're going to do that, again, practice if you would like to. I'm going to zoom right in here to one of them. I should probably start with one that isn't quite so important. I'll start over here. I like to start with the ones that don't have as much visual weight to them. So this one here is almost in the center of my painting. This is one of the most important ones. This one here is off to the side, so it's not going to have the same sort of significance in terms of the composition. Little bit of paint, you don't want too much. So again, just a dab of paint. And what we're going to do is go on either side of this stroke, and we're just going to do teeny little dabs. Dab, 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 dab. This is giving us kind of a soft, seedy look to our grass. Like that. And we're going to do that over and over again. However many blades of grass you want to add this into. Dab, 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 dab. If you want to extend your grass, make it a bit longer, you can dab above the grass line and just kind of, you know, meet up with the bottom, and you can even make your grass look a little bit longer. So here I'm going to go dab, 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 dab. Just little tiny, tiny strokes, just the smallest little strokes. There we go. Just teeny weeny little strokes. These I'm going to leave empty. This one I'm going to go a little higher with it here. So I'm just going to pull this up a bit. Oof. There we go. I like to leave some negative space in between some of these strokes. Maybe some of the seeds fell off. It just makes it feel a little bit more airy, a little bit more organic. Now I don't want this tip to touch that one, so I'm going to start this one a little lower. I don't want to create a tension point. So tension points are when two kind of areas connect together and create visual stress. So if this touched that just a little bit, it would create a tension point. So I'm trying to make my stems either overlap completely or not intersect at all, but I'm trying to avoid just the points touching or just the sides touching. And just dab, 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 dab. Nice delicate dabs here. Remember, if you need to, practice on a piece of paper. Dab, 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 dab. Dab, 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 dab. Over and over. Ooh, I like that one. I'm glad I saved that one. That one was a big, important one, and I think it ended up looking quite nice. We'll zoom in here. Dab, 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 dab. So I'm basically just putting the brush down and then pulling it up in a direction, right? Either left or right to get that nice, soft, wispy look. Dab, 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 dab. Just nice, gentle dabs. Sometimes painting sunsets can make me feel very relaxed. I think it's just like, makes me want to be there, you know? And this is actually inspired by a place where I go camping. So when I go camping, there's this beautiful sunset over a lake, and I stand on these rocks to watch it go down. And the rocks have these little blades of grass at the bottom. So I kind of created this composition based on a life experience that makes me quite happy. And as a result, the painting of it also makes me quite happy, which is nice. And sunsets are relatively straightforward in terms of what you can do, right? If you can figure out how to make that nice kind of sunset sky like we did today, and you can figure out how to do a little bit of detail painting with your silhouette, you can do almost anything. I love sunset paintings. All right, so I've added in my nice soft tops to those blades of grass, those cattails, whatever it is that we're going to call them today. Now there is just one more step that we want to do, and that step is to add in a little bit of a reflection on the rocks. So you see here we have a little hint of brightness. Now when I am looking at my sunset when I'm camping, the rocks are sometimes a little bit moist, or they're at least shiny, right? They're smooth because they've had kind of waves crashing against them, and they do reflect light in a beautiful way. So we are going to just capture that, just a hint of it here today. So the sun is coming in and just giving the tips of our rocks a little bit of a pink glow. So I'm going to use my pink and my black together. So here's my medium-sized flat brush. You can see it here against my finger. This is a medium-sized flat brush. And I am going to do a little bit of pink, like that, and black on the other side, like that. So I have black on half and I have pink on just the tip of it. And now what I'm going to do is start with the rocks that are closest to the horizon line, so furthest from me. So the ones kind of on the top here. Might have a bit too much pink. I'm just going to take a little bit off. There we go. And I'm going to add in, let me see, I think I'll start with maybe this here. I'm going to make a rock. I'm going to make a rock like this. So I'm just kind of adding in a bit of pink there. There we go. So I'm going to go over that a few times. So my black and my pink should eventually blend together here to create a nice soft highlight. So my pink is still on one side of my brush, my black is still on the other side of the brush. And we want this highlight just to be nice and subtle. Can you see it there? Yeah, there we go. It's a little hard with the reflecting light there. There you go. So you can see it in there now. So we're going to keep doing that for all of the rocks that we want to have a little bit of a glow to them. And I could do like a rock here in front. Maybe this is kind of coming down in front. Oh, the pink got a little bit aggressive there. So here, maybe there's a rock right there as well. And I would say this is an optional step. So I don't always teach this. When I'm teaching, sometimes I will skip this step over. It just depends on how excited the learners are to do this step. So if you don't really want to do this step, I think it's okay. You can be done your painting if you want to be. There we go, a little bit of a glow there. Just going to take some black now and blend down here. So you can see I'm getting that little highlight. So it makes it look like there's a rock cutting in front of that other rock. Now I'm going to add a little rock. Maybe I'll add one here, and then I'll do this one here at the end. So I'm going to add a little rock, again, just half and half. So I'm going to go here and make this have a little bit of a glow. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to my brush. It's feeling a bit dry. The paint is feeling a bit dry, so I'm just going to add a bit of water. A little bit of water can sometimes help with a nice small blend like this. There we go. That looks quite nice. Get that blended. And I'm going to add a rock into that space. Just add a tiny bit of water to my brush here. So this one's going to come in front. There we go. So now we have a little bit of a highlight on some of our rocks. We could even add one more if we wanted to, just, by adding a little bit of pink into anywhere. Like maybe I'll throw a rock here overlapping this front, right? So maybe there's a little rock here as well. So you can add rocks even where you don't have that rock silhouette. You can just throw them in by adding a little bit of a highlight. There we go. So now we are finished our painting. That's the last step. Give your painting a signature when you're done. It's always a good habit to get into. I like to use my tiny little brush. I'll use pink for my signature today. And I just sign my initials. I don't think I need to put my whole name, so I just go K-M. There we go. And that is our first painting. So when you are finished your painting, please send me a photo. I will give you feedback on it. If you don't want to send me a picture, I totally understand. What I would like you to do is just let me know that you watched the video and painted along. And if you're not comfortable sharing your artwork with me, again, I understand. It's okay. I'm really looking forward to seeing how your painting turned out today. I hope you enjoyed our first painting. Have a wonderful week. Bye, everyone. I'll see you soon.